So you've been drawing a little bit. That's amazing. Congratulations. Maybe you've been drawing in your sketchbook that you have and you're improving, but now you've decided that you want to take things into the
digital realm.
Which is commendable. There's so much that you can do digitally with art. But there might be a lot of unknowns for you, and if you're new to it, it might be a little intimidating, a little overwhelming. What's the best workflow of how to create a piece of art from start to finish? I just thought I would give you a quick little overview of a workflow that I like to use that might be helpful. So I recently came back from a little vacation that was really nice. We went down to Florida for a couple weeks, and because we went to Florida and Disney was a big part of our trip, I will use the classic Disney character of Goofy to demonstrate these concepts. So let's dive in. Okay, so first things first, you want to open your digital program, whether that be Procreate, Photoshop, whatever. There's a bunch of them. Right now we are in Photoshop, and I'm going to show you how I do things in this program. So because this is a coloring demonstration, I'm not going to focus too much on the sketch. So I just found something. I didn't draw this, but there you go. This is a kind of Disney concept character description of Goofy that I found, and I like that. So what I did is I just made a new layer on top of it and I traced it. So now we have the sketch. This can be anything. This can be something that you drew yourself, or you can take something that's already drawn just to practice like this. So in this case, let's use Goofy. So we have this Goofy sketch and he is on a layer on its own. So for those of you unfamiliar with layers, I actually made a video explaining how layers work if you're really new to this, but it's pretty simple. So basically if we made a new layer on top of this, it would cover the sketch. And if we made a different layer below the sketch, it would be behind it. See what I mean? So we're gonna work behind the sketch so that we can continue to see our lines throughout the process. So step one, we're going to block in our flat colors, putting down the flats. So what that means is we're gonna take a layer behind the sketch and we're gonna fill in the solid colors of all the different pieces of our character, like the skin, the clothing, the gloves, the shoes, just their base colors. So if, for example, his top under his vest is kind of like a orange, we can color it in orange. Just solid, no variation of values or blending or anything like that. Now there's a bunch of ways to do that. You can do what I did and just color it in by hand. But you can see I've gone out of the lines here. You can be a lot more careful than I just was and not go out the lines, but you can also come back in with something like the lasso tool or an eraser and just clean it up. That's easy. Or what I like to do is to take that lasso tool, that same selection tool, whatever it may be, it's usually a lasso, and select the entire silhouette of your character or whatever it is you're coloring in as accurately as possible, right? And now, because that's selected, when you go to your brush again, you're not going to be able to go outside those lines. You can fill in anything you want. You can fill the whole thing in one color, or you can go back and brush in the sections you want, except now you're not going to see it go outside the lines. But what I usually like to do is to just fill everything one color and then start going in with my flats on the individual sections. So let's do that. There we go. We kind of filled in all the flat colors of everything based on the references of Goofy I've seen. His colors are kind of like this. So what's next? Well, you can deselect that, but now we have those colors on their own layer and the sketch on its own layer as well. So here's me toggling them on and off or moving them one from another. This is what we've done so far. So you could leave it like that. I mean, that's a style, it's colored in, but it doesn't have much depth to it just yet. So the next step is creating a new layer again above the color layer that we just put, the flats. and set that blending mode to multiply. Now in each piece of digital software, there'll always be a layers panel, and within that layers panel, there will be a spot in which you can choose the blending mode. So there's normal, which it's set to by default, and then there's a whole bunch of other ones, including multiply. You don't need to know what they all do. There's ones that I go to quite often, and multiply is one of them. And what is multiply? Well, I'll put a link in the description as to a description of what all the blending modes do. But what a multiply layer will do will take the color that you have selected and whatever is beneath that layer and kind of multiply the two. So it kind of creates this darker tone, but here, I'll just show you. So right now we kind of have this beigey kind of color selected, and I have the layer set to multiply. So when it's against a white background, it'll look like the color that we've chose. But watch what happens when I go into the blue. It kind of takes on that bluish tone, right? It almost looks like completely different color, but I'm not changing the color at all. It's just interacting with the blue that way. And when I go over to this orangey section of his shirt, same thing. Over here on the vest, under his chin, right? So this is all the same color I'm using, but it's set to multiply. So this is a great way to just kind of paint in shadows, because you don't have to be trying to figure out what color each shadow will be. You can kind of stick to one color and then make all the shadows consistent within your character. Now, it's just up to you as to where to put those shadows. So you kind of need to start understanding how light would fall onto an object, which you can get better at studying. But let me get rid of my squiggles here. And I'll show you it with a different color as well. If you choose a very dark color as your multiply layer, it might become a bit too dark when it's multiplied with what's beneath it. Like, for example, this kind of deeper brown along with the blue now becomes very dark. That's a bit too much for just a general shadow. Unless, of course, that's a style you're going for and you want it to be really drastic shadows. But I am going to stay in the lighter range. But for a little bit of a darker shadow, I'm just going to bring it down a bit. So then I'll kind of go deeper into where even less light would be. And maybe do that a couple times. Bring it down even more. And then really get into those places that, not much light is getting to at all. If you think of the light coming down this way. And then the last step, we'll make one more layer, and we're gonna set the blending mode of this one to color dodge. Kind of like multiply, it's a little bit of a shortcut to, instead of painting shadows, this time we're gonna be painting highlights. So I would usually choose kind of like a mid-range, I don't know, brown kind of color. You can experiment with what these colors do. Like if you chose a mid-green, it would look like this. If you choose a mid-brown, it would look more like that. Slightly different, but the way that the color interacts with the layer beneath it will generate something new. But usually it will result in a lighter color that will resemble a highlight. So I'm gonna soften my brush a little bit in Photoshop. I'm gonna choose something a bit more flowy. And because I've painted my shadows with the light coming down toward his face, I'm going to paint the highlights that way as well. So all these areas that are exposed to the light should have some type of highlight to them. Right? And your character starts coming alive when you start adding these shadows and highlights. It adds a bunch of dimension to what you're drawing. And that's just a really simple way of doing it. Hopefully that's helpful. Now you can go in and of course tweak this to as much as you like. You can spend some time really blending and figuring out where exactly you want the shadows, the highlights, what colors you want, different blending modes. But this is the way that I like to do it. There's so many options, but here's a easy little workflow for you to try, and hopefully that's helpful. I will be back with more tips in the future. All the best till next time. Thank you guys very much for watching. Peace out.